He stood at the edge of the eastern frontier in 75 AD, holding a letter that told him his most trusted general had just declared himself Emperor of Rome. But that wasn't the worst part of the letter. The worst part was why the general said he did it, because he had been told that Marcus Aurelius was already dead. Someone had sent Avidius Cassius a false report of Marcus's death, and the historians who pieced this together later pointed to one likely source, a source so close to Marcus that it shook the foundations of everything he had built. The name attached to the rumor was Faustina, his wife. Now, before we go any further, stay with me here, because what Marcus Aurelius did next is one of the most misunderstood moments in all of ancient history. Most people, when they hear this story, assume he punished her. They assume he raged. They assume the philosopher king finally cracked. He didn't. And the reason why will tell you something about Stoicism that no motivational poster ever will. But to understand his response, you have to understand what this man had already endured for decades. The kind of slow, grinding, public humiliation that most of us will never experience. Because the betrayal in 175 AD was not the beginning of the story. It was the end of a very long one. Marcus Aurelius married Faustina the Younger in 145 AD when he was 24 years old and she was around 15. The marriage was arranged by the Emperor Antoninus Pius, who was Marcus's adoptive father and Faustina's biological father. It was a dynastic union, not a romantic one, though by all evidence, Marcus came to love her genuinely and deeply over the course of their 30-year marriage. Faustina was, by the accounts of her time, extraordinarily beautiful and politically sharp. She bore Marcus at least 14 children, traveled with him on military campaigns to the Danube frontier, a brutal, freezing war zone, and was given the title Mater Castrorum, Mother of the Camps, by the legions who respected her presence there. She was not a passive figure in his reign, she was a participant in it. But starting sometime in the 160s AD, the rumors began. Ancient sources, including the Historia Augusta, a collection of imperial biographies written in the 3rd and 4th centuries, record accusations that Faustina had taken lovers. The names attached to the gossip were specific and deliberately humiliating. Gladiators, a flute player, sailors, soldiers. The accusations were designed to strip her of dignity by linking her to men of the lowest social class. Now here's where you have to be a careful reader of history. The Historia Augusta is not a reliable source. Historians today treat it with serious skepticism. It contains fabrications, exaggerations, and political smears. The accusations against Faustina may have been entirely invented by political enemies who wanted to undermine Marcus by attacking his wife. We simply cannot know for certain. But here's what we do know. The rumors were public, they were widespread, and Marcus knew about them. And what did he do? He promoted her. He honored her. He struck coins with her face on them. He gave her titles. When advisors reportedly suggested he divorce her to protect his reputation, Marcus's response, recorded by the historian Cassius Dio, was blunt and almost jarring in its practicality. He said, "If I send away my wife, I must also return her dowry," and her dowry was the empire. That line gets quoted as a joke sometimes, as if Marcus was being cynical or cold, but read it again more slowly. He wasn't distancing himself from Faustina. He was saying she is the empire. She is inseparable from everything I am and everything I rule. To throw her away because of what people are saying would be to make the opinions of gossips more powerful than my own judgment. He refused to do that. Now, and this is the open loop I want you to hold, there is something Marcus wrote in his private journal, the Meditations, that reveals exactly what was happening inside his mind during these years. He never wrote it for an audience. He wrote it for himself, in Greek, in the middle of military campaigns. And what he wrote about other people's opinions is either the most liberated thought you've ever heard or the most deeply unsettling one. We'll get there. But first, the rebellion. By 1075 AD, Marcus had been at war for nearly a decade. The Marcomannic Wars on the Danube frontier were exhausting and brutal, a grinding conflict against Germanic tribes that cost tens of thousands of Roman lives. Marcus himself was in poor health, possibly suffering from a stomach ulcer that plagued him his entire adult life. He was tired. His empire was tired. And then came the letter from Syria. Avidius Cassius was one of Rome's finest generals, a man Marcus had personally elevated, trusted with command of the eastern provinces, and praised in letters as an exceptional soldier. In April of 75 AD, Cassius declared himself emperor. He had received word that Marcus was dead, and he moved quickly to claim the throne before a power vacuum could form. Within days, Egypt and much of the east had declared for him. The crisis was existential. A civil war between the man who commanded the Danube legions in the west and the man who now commanded the eastern legions could tear the empire apart. Roman civil wars had done exactly that before. Within living memory, the year of the four emperors in 69 AD had nearly destroyed everything. Marcus had to move fast, and he had to move carefully. But here's what he did first, before he marched, before he made any military decision. He called the Senate together. And in that address, recorded by Cassius Dio, he said something remarkable. He said he hoped the matter could be resolved without bloodshed. He said he pitied Cassius for being deceived by a false report. He did not call Cassius a traitor. He called him a man who had made a mistake based on bad information. And then the question of Faustina. The ancient sources, again, treat these with caution, suggest that Faustina may have written letters to Cassius encouraging his rebellion, perhaps because she feared what would happen to her children if Marcus died on campaign and a new emperor not of her family took power. Whether this is true or a smear invented after her death, Marcus never said. He never accused her. He never put it in writing. Before Marcus could even reach the east with his army, the crisis resolved itself. In July of 175 AD, just 3 months after the rebellion began, Avidius Cassius was assassinated by 2 of his own officers. His head was brought to Marcus. And here is where Marcus did something that shocked even his own contemporaries. He refused to look at it. He ordered the head buried with honor. He pardoned Cassius's family. He burned the correspondence that had been seized, letters that may have contained evidence of who had conspired with Cassius. He burned the letters without reading them. Think about that for a moment. The man had just survived a rebellion that could have killed him and destroyed his dynasty. He had letters in his hands that could name every person who had betrayed him. And he chose not to know. He chose to extinguish the opportunity for revenge before it could tempt him. He then traveled east to the provinces that had supported Cassius, and instead of punishment, he brought clemency. He reduced taxes, he confirmed appointments, he gave speeches about the value of civil peace. The historian Cassius Dio, who was a contemporary and generally reliable, records that senators and citizens were astonished by his restraint. They had expected the cold calculation of a wounded ruler. Instead, they got something that looked almost like forgiveness. Faustina traveled with him on this eastern journey. She was at his side in Cappadocia, in Asia Minor, moving through the provinces of his empire as she had done on campaign before. Whatever had happened, whatever had been said, suspected, or confirmed, Marcus kept her with him. And then, in the winter of 175 AD, at a small town called Halala near the base of the Taurus Mountains, Faustina died. Suddenly. Possibly of gout, possibly of something else. She was around 45 years old. Marcus's grief at her death was, by all accounts, genuine and deep. He asked the Senate to deify her, to declare her a goddess. He funded a new institution in her name, a charity that provided for orphaned girls, called the Puellae Faustinianae. He had a temple built for her in the Roman Forum. You can still see its columns standing today on the Via Sacra. And he renamed the town where she died, Faustinopolis, City of Faustina. In the Meditations, Book 1, Section 17, Marcus lists the things he is grateful for in his life. Among them, he writes that he is grateful for a wife so obedient, so affectionate, and so unaffected. He wrote this privately. No one was watching. No political performance was required. This was a man writing to himself about what he valued, and he chose to write about his gratitude for her. Now we reach the thing I promised you at the start, the passage from the Meditations that reveals how Marcus actually processed all of this. Not the public honors, not the political decisions, but the interior work, the private philosophy that kept him from being destroyed by what people said about the person he loved most. In Book 4 of the Meditations, Marcus writes this: You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But he goes further in Book 6, and this is the sharper, more uncomfortable version. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. He was naming a trap he was actively trying to escape. What Marcus understood, and what he was practicing, imperfectly, humanly, but deliberately, is that the opinions of others about your life and your relationships have no inherent power over you. They feel powerful. They feel like they're shaping reality. But they are, in the Stoic framework, externals. And externals are by definition not up to you. The only thing that was up to Marcus was how he chose to respond. He chose not to perform outrage he didn't feel. He chose not to punish Faustina to satisfy critics who would have applauded the gesture. He chose not to let the crowd's narrative about his marriage become more real to him than his own 30 years of lived experience with her. That is not weakness. That is one of the hardest things a human being can do. And now, 9 minutes in, right on schedule, I want to ask you a question that might be uncomfortable. When was the last time you made a decision about a relationship? Romantic, familial, professional, based primarily on what other people thought of it. Not what you knew, not what you felt, but what you were afraid they were saying. Because what we're about to get into is the bridge between Marcus's story and your actual life in 2026. And I'll tell you right now, the Stoic technique he was using has a name, it has a method, and it is learnable. You don't need to be a philosopher emperor to use it. You need about 60 seconds a day and a willingness to be honest with yourself. But what does this mean for you, watching this in 2026? Let's be concrete. Situation 1. You're in a relationship, romantic, long-term, and people in your life have opinions about it. Maybe your family thinks your partner isn't good enough. Maybe your friends make comments. Maybe there's gossip at work about the two of you. The opinions are arriving constantly, and each one lands like a small verdict on something you care about deeply. The natural response, the one your nervous system pushes you toward, is to manage the narrative, to defend your partner publicly, to change your behavior to accommodate the critics, to prove something to people who have already decided what they think. Marcus had the entire Roman Empire forming opinions about his marriage, carved in stone, minted on coins, debated in the Senate, and he did not manage their narrative. He managed his own interior one. Situation 2. The rumors aren't about your partner. They're about you. Someone at work, in your family, in your social circle is saying things about your character, your choices, your loyalty. The story spreading about you is wrong or partial or deliberately distorted, and the temptation is overwhelming to chase it down, to correct it, to make everyone understand the truth. Marcus had this exact experience with the Avidius Cassius rebellion. A false narrative that he was dead spread through the entire eastern half of his empire and triggered a civil war. The false story had real consequences, and yet his response was not to launch a reputation management campaign. It was to let his actions over the following months speak without commentary from him. He showed up. He was visibly alive. He demonstrated clemency. He let reality correct the fiction. Now here's the technique. Marcus called it, in his own writing, the discipline of assent. The Stoics, and Epictetus in particular, who was Marcus's philosophical hero, taught that between any external event and your emotional response there is a gap, a moment. And in that moment you have a choice about whether to grant the external event power over your interior state. The discipline of assent is the practice of pausing in that gap. In practical terms, here's how it works when someone says something about your relationship or your character. Before you respond, before you defend, explain, attack, or collapse, you ask yourself one question. Is this true according to my own honest examination? Not true according to my ego. Not true according to my fear. True according to the most honest, clear-eyed version of myself that I can access right now. If the answer is no, if after genuine examination you conclude that the accusation or the rumor is false, then Marcus's framework says you are free. Free not in the sense that it won't hurt, but free in the sense that it cannot define you without your consent. You do not have to grant it reality by responding to it. Your silence is not admission. It is refusal to play on terrain that was never yours to begin with. If the answer is yes, if the honest examination reveals something true in the accusation, then you are also free, but differently. You're free to change, free to address the actual root of the problem, rather than its public reflection. Marcus almost certainly spent time in private contemplation, asking himself uncomfortable questions about his marriage, his leadership, his choices. The meditations are evidence of a man who interrogated himself relentlessly. That's not self-punishment. That's self-governance. There is a third response that Marcus modeled that is harder to talk about, and it's this. Sometimes the truth is that you don't know. You cannot verify the accusation. The evidence is ambiguous. The situation is irreducibly uncertain. And in those cases, the cases of genuine not knowing, Marcus's approach was to act according to his values anyway, and to refuse to make irreversible decisions based on unverifiable information. He burned the letters. He didn't act on what he couldn't confirm. This is extraordinarily difficult for modern people, because we live in an information environment that tells us certainty is always available if we just look hard enough. We check phones, we search names, we read threads, we ask mutual friends. We try to convert uncertainty into data. But some things cannot be datafied. Some things require you to make a decision about who you are in the face of what you cannot know. Marcus Aurelius chose to be the man who honored his wife after her death, who built her a temple, who named a city after her, who wrote in his private journal, the one place where performance was impossible, that he was grateful for her. Whatever happened between them in those complex 30 years, whatever was true or false in the accusations, he made a choice about who he was going to be in relation to the person he loved. And he held that choice. That is the Stoic move. Not the suppression of emotion. Marcus grieved. He wrote about grief in the Meditations. He acknowledged loss openly. Not the pretense that rumors don't sting. Of course they do. And pretending otherwise is not philosophy. It's avoidance. The Stoic move is the refusal to let the sting determine your behavior. The refusal to let other people's narratives become more authoritative than your own examined judgment. Epictetus, the former slave whose writings Marcus studied his entire adult life, wrote in the Enchiridion, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things." Note the precision of that. Not the things. The opinions about the things. The event is not the problem. The story told about the event is the problem. And the story told about the event is at least partially within your control to shape by the ongoing testimony of your actual life. Let me give you the journaling prompt. Sit with this one. Don't rush it. Write at the top of the page, what do I actually believe about this situation based on my own honest experience? Then below that, what am I afraid others believe about it? Then, what decisions have I made or avoided making based on the second question rather than the first? That gap between what you actually believe and what you're afraid others believe is where a huge amount of unnecessary suffering lives. It's where people stay in bad situations to avoid looking like failures. It's where people leave good situations to avoid the appearance of weakness. It's where decisions get made by committee, the imaginary committee of everyone who has an opinion about your life, instead of by you. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire of 60 million people. He had more observers, more critics, more people forming opinions about his personal life than almost any human being in history. And he wrote in Book 3 of the Meditations, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." Self-respect, not public respect, not reputation. Self-respect, the internal verdict, the one that only you can render on yourself. The Roman Empire did not fall because Marcus Aurelius refused to divorce his wife over rumors. It did not become weaker because he pardoned the family of a rebel general. It did not suffer because he burned letters that might have given him grounds for vengeance. What the empire got instead was 5 more years of a ruler who maintained his integrity under pressure, who governed himself first and the empire second. That sequencing matters. And the personal empire you govern, your household, your relationships, your reputation over the long arc of your life follows the same logic. When you maintain your self-respect under the pressure of other people's narratives, You don't lose. You build something that external opinion cannot erode, because you didn't build it out of external opinion in the first place. Faustina the Younger died in 175 AD at the foot of the Taurus Mountains, having traveled with her husband through wars, losses, and rumors that followed her for decades. Her temple in the Roman Forum was later converted to a Christian church, the Church of San Lorenzo in Miranda, and it still stands. The columns Marcus raised in her honor are still there, 2,000 years later, at the center of what was once the center of the world. Marcus Aurelius died 6 years after her in 180 AD on the Danube frontier, still campaigning. He was 58 years old. His meditations were found among his private papers, 12 books of notes he wrote to himself over years of military campaigns and imperial duties, in Greek, never intending them to be published. They were published anyway, and they've been in continuous circulation for nearly 2,000 years. Which suggests he was onto something. What he was onto, in the end, is something very simple, but very hard, that the quality of your life is determined not by what happens to you, and not by what people say about you, but by the quality of the judgments you make in response to both. That's it. That's the whole philosophy, the practice of a lifetime compressed into one sentence, and Marcus Aurelius spent his entire life trying to live up to it. If you take one thing from this video, take the question, whose verdict am I actually living under? Yours, arrived at through honest self-examination, or theirs, formed in ignorance of your actual life? Marcus asked himself that question every day, in a private journal, on a military frontier, surrounded by enemies external and internal. You can ask it too. It costs nothing, and the answer might change everything. If this kind of history meets philosophy storytelling is what you're looking for, there's more where this came from on this channel. The next video goes deep on another moment that most people get completely wrong, a story about a different kind of silence and what it actually costs. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And if this one landed for you, share it with someone who's been letting the wrong voices write their story.